are very dedicated officers who were out there protecting us, and thank God they had some of the things they needed to keep them safe.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio discussing the weekend shooting of 2 police officers in Brooklyn. Those officers suffered non-life-threatening injuries, but there's a lot of concern that the shooting may be terror-related. According to reports, the suspects recently converted to Islam while serving time in prison, which raises questions about the reach of ISIS here in the United States. Let's welcome in former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. He is the author of the bestseller From Jailer to Jailed. And we want to get your take on Islamic radicalization. But before we do that, Bernie, radicalization courtesy of the mayor and city council in New York City. I understand there's a movement afoot allowing illegal immigrants there to vote. What's your reaction to that legislation perhaps being introduced very quickly here?
Well, I think it's outrageous. And I think it's ironic. I was looking at an article this morning where the NAACP and the Women's League was supporting something like this, some proposed legislation like this. You know, we have 6 million people that's precluded from voting as a result of criminal records. I'm surprised the NAACP, they're not fighting for their voters' rights to be given back. We're going to allow another 500,000, 1 million illegal immigrants, non-citizens, allow them to vote. I think this is a very transparent attempt to build the Democratic Democratic Party enrollment. And I think it's outrageous. I don't know who would put a bill like this together, who would even think of it.
Well, people who, in the old days, Bernie, in politics, we talked about getting out the vote. Columnist Selwyn Duke has talked about the left trying to bring in the vote, give the vote to people who are here illegally, and they'll vote themselves all sorts of benefits. Let's return to another question here, and that is the notion of radicalization, Islamic radicalization behind bars. How prevalent is that?
Well, it is prevalent. It's problematic. Look, there's a lot of guys that will jump on the religious bandwagon when they go to prison in an attempt to join a group or a gang or something to that effect. But radicalization in prison, and we've seen it not only here in the U.S., but abroad as well. Look at Zarqawi in 2006, who was killed by U.S. coalition forces. He was radicalized himself in a Jordanian prison. It's a big issue. It's a problematic issue. It happens. It's going to continue to happen, especially here where ISIS is constantly recruiting. It's going to continue to happen, and it's something we have to stay on top of.
Well, even as we see the rise of ISIS domestically, there is a note that in the news that President Obama wants to cut counter-terrorism funding for New York in some way to punish Chuck Schumer. That's what one of your successors, Ray Kelly, is saying. He believes that's vindictiveness behind the effort to cut those funds. Do you think that's what's going on?
Well, I can't say the reason for the cuts, but I will tell you this. I think it's outrageous that anyone would even consider cutting, especially New York City. I mean, national security funds, Homeland Security funds in general should not be cut, given that the FBI director, the CIA director, the Homeland Security secretary have all said the threats against this country are increasing. Well, that being said, who in their right mind would cut the funds we need to have a safe and secure city like New York City, knowing it's the #1 principal target of ISIS, and Al-Qaeda and any one of these radical groups going back to long before September 11th. So I think it's ridiculous it's even being talked about.
Ridiculous and dangerous. Bernie Kerik, thank you so much for your time. You heard what Bernie had to say. Now I'm just wondering what you have to say. Cutting the anti-terror budget by almost half in New York City? Why don't you send your comments to me at newsmaxtv.com/comments. And when we come back, sending money and personnel to Central America to fight street gangs. We'll talk about it.